Hello friends, we have finally arrived at the very last episode of HBO and BBC's His Dark Materials, and it has been a hell of a journey. I looked back at my screenshots while I was putting together my videos for this season, and I can't believe how much our characters have aged and changed, how many worlds we've been to, how many different kinds of creatures we've been introduced to, and it's been a lot. And I'm excited and also a little bit heartbroken that we have finally arrived at the end of our journey. And I am somewhat reluctant but happy to get into it. So let's dive into the Botanic Garden. It is the next day after the battle between the Republic and Kingdom of Heaven, and Lyra and Will wake up peacefully in the world of the Mulefa. Lyra takes a dip in what looks like a lake or a pond, and she confides in Will that she has so many questions about her parents. She's really seeing them as these complex people for one of the first times in her life, and she knows that there is a lot of moral complexity, some very nuanced feelings happening, and she is trying to sift through them. She has a very keen sense that Lord Asriel is gone, and she knows that her mom is gone since she did watch the Golden Monkey Demon disappear. So we realize that she is actually the orphan that she had always been told that she was when she was growing up. If we go way back to the first episode, really, Lyra was brought up thinking that her parents had died in an aeronauting accident and that Lord Asriel was her uncle. She never knew about her mother. And it was pretty traumatic when she learned that A, both of her parents were alive, and that B, they were indeed the people she had encountered. So now she truly is an orphan, and that is something that she's probably going to have to process for a while. In addition to that, Will has definitely lost his father. He grew up with some ambiguity, not knowing whether his father was alive or dead. Now he knows that not only is he dead, but there's really no other version of him that he will encounter. So he's not an orphan, but it's really just him and his mom now. For the first time in what feels like a long time, we see haughty Father Gomez, and he has entered the world of the Mulefa as well, ready to fuck shit up. Just a reminder, he has assigned himself the task of finding the serpent and taking out the serpent before the serpent can tempt Lyra, aka Eve, and he is very confident in this mission. He has a spy fly that he previously used to track down Mrs. Coulter. He's now using that spy fly to hopefully locate Mary Malone, and Mary has accidentally left something behind. We see that the spy fly is sniffing around a scarf hanging out by a tree that Mary was resting on when she first got to this world. So he's picked up the scent. He sees some creatures in the distance. They're not Mulefa, they're what Philip Pullman describes as the grazers in the book, but he sees them. He decides that naturally they're evil, and he takes out his gun and shoots one just for fun. So cool guy. I don't think I've mentioned before, but in the book, the Mulefa lived alongside their antagonists, who are called the Tulapi, I believe, and they're described as these gigantic winged birds that can turn into kind of living boats, and who frequently raid the Mulefa's villages and literally shit over everything. We don't see the Tulapi here. In the book, Father Gomez creates an uneasy alliance between himself and these birds by killing one of them with a shotgun. So, you know, aggression. That doesn't happen, but we do see him take out an animal just for sport. So again, cool guy. Of course, Father Gomez doesn't know this, but Balthamos has been trailing him. We thought Balthamos disappeared. He didn't have his heart in this mission, but he has actually been keeping tabs on Father Gomez and is watching his every move. Lyra and Will are also not alone. They are soon spotted after waking up by Atal, Mary Malone's special Mulefa friend, and Atal cajoles them back with her. They follow her back to the village, and Atal takes them straight to Mary. We see a very sweet, very loving reunion between Lyra and Mary. Will also seems very open. He's definitely heard about Mary from Lyra before. So this is really a great almost a family reunion. Of course, Will and Lyra are in this world ostensibly to reunite with their demons who they had previously seen the day before. The demons are not with the kids at this point, though the kids know that the demons are somewhere close by. So there is still this sense that they need to find them and reconnect. Mary Malone is delighted to show the kids around the Mulefa village. She shows them the amber spyglass, aka Disc of Amber, and explains Sroff to them. Mary tells the kids about the problem of Sroff and the dying trees. The whole ecosystem has been royally fucked up, and she is very concerned about the Mulefa. She also tells the kids that she has a feeling that some great discovery will help resolve this issue, though she can't say what it is. I loved this subtle bit of foreshadowing. We don't know what the discovery is, but it's the idea that some new piece of knowledge is the key to this problem, and indeed it is. Turns out it's Lyra's discovery of herself, of her sexuality, of love, of deep, intimate connection with another person. As the day wears on, Lyra, Will, Mary, and Atal are sitting by a campfire talking about demons and their connection to them. Lyra decides to ask Mary if Mary believes in souls and points to Mary's history as a nun, which of course takes Will by surprise. And Mary says, yes, there are still people who join convents, we still exist. And she kind of holds back. She's not exactly sure what she wants to tell the kids, but Atal kind of prompts her and says, Mary, tell them stories. And this made me think that Atal can hear those ghost voices in the wind that we saw in the Abyss episode when the ghosts are leaving the land of the dead and advising one another to tell the harpy stories. And I just loved this transmission of the message. And here we have Atal telling Mary, tell them stories, be the storyteller. With this encouragement from Atal, Mary tells the kids a story about her sexual reawakening she had in Lisbon some years ago when she was a nun. She talks about going to Lisbon to give a paper at a conference on physics, and rather than going back to her room after the paper, she went out with some of her colleagues. She says that her paper was well received and she wanted to enjoy herself. And at this table where she is enjoying this fine meal with wine, she sees someone and that person offers her a piece of marzipan, almond paste type candy. And there was this kind of instant connection or attraction to this person. In the show, that person happened to be a woman, which I loved. I love the sexual diversity that the show highlights. And Mary realizes that the feeling, this ache in her stomach that she's now feeling of desire and of attraction is one that she's felt before, but she hasn't really thought much about or allowed herself to feel. It's a feeling that she has repressed for a very long time. And it sparks something in her. She wants to feel this way again. And as a nun, she's not making any space in her life to do so. She's supposed to devote herself to the Lord. And she decides this isn't the path for her at this point. She gives the kids a really beautiful speech about the emptiness of living for reward, or at least for the avoidance of punishment. She talks about seizing the life that love brings, even with its danger and risk. Mary says, I was doing something with all of my nature, not just a part of it. And while she's telling the kids about this moment for her, we see that Will and Lyra are giving each other these very subtle side-eye, side glances. There's something brewing between the two of them, and the story is inspiring them to perhaps consider each other in a different way and perhaps to consider themselves in a different way. You know I have to read at least part of this passage because this is my channel and that's how I roll. So here we go. This is Mary speaking to Lyra and Will about her experience in Lisbon. And at 9:30 in the evening, at the restaurant table in Portugal, Mary continued, someone gave me a piece of marzipan and it all came back. And I thought, am I really going to spend the rest of my life without ever feeling that again? I thought, I want to go to China. It's full of treasures and strangeness and mystery and joy. I thought, will anyone be better off if I go straight back to the hotel and say my prayers and confess to the priest and promise never to fall into temptation again? Will anyone be better for making me miserable? And the answer came back, no, no one will. There's no one to fret, no one to condemn, no one to bless me for being a good girl, no one to punish me for being wicked. Heaven was empty. I didn't know whether God had died or whether there never had been a God at all. Either way, I felt free and lonely, and I didn't know whether I was happy or unhappy, but something very strange had happened, and all that huge change came about as I had the marzipan in my mouth before I'd even swallowed it. A taste, a memory, a landslide. When I did swallow it and looked at the man across the table, I could tell he knew something had happened. I couldn't tell him there and then. It was still too strange and private, almost for me. But later on, we went for a walk along the beach in the dark, and the warm night breeze kept stirring my hair about, and the Atlantic was being very well behaved, little quiet waves around our feet. And I took the crucifix from around my neck and I threw it in the sea. That was it. All over. Gone. So that was how I stopped being a nun, she said. In response to this story from Mary, Philip Pullman writes about Lyra's reaction. He says, Lyra knew exactly what she meant, and half an hour earlier, she would have had no idea at all. And inside her, that rich house with all its doors open and all its rooms lit, stood waiting, quiet, expectant. I love that passage. I just think it's such an incredible way to capture that first feeling of love, of that disorientation that happens when you're young and you're exploring yourself and understanding a connection with someone else for the very first time. There's that visceral excitement, and I thought this captured it beautifully. The next morning, Lyra and Will head off on their own to hopefully find their demons, though they don't seem to be in a rush, and they find themselves at a swimming hole again and decide to go swimming together very awkwardly this time. Something has definitely shifted between them. They're looking at each other differently, and there's a tension that hasn't been there before. Father Gomez is right there, and he actually sees Lyra, and recognizing Lyra from probably photos at the magisterium, he decides that this is the time to shoot his shot, literally. There's no need to pursue the serpent if he can take Eve herself out right now. This is, of course, when Balthamos himself intervenes. Father Gomez, as the good Christian authority follower that he is fucking psyched to meet an angel. He realizes that Balthamos, this creature talking to him, is an angel, and he thinks, we're on the same side. What are you doing trying to stop me from shooting this? We're bros. And Balthamos is quick to correct him. They are not on the same side. This reminded me of a quote from Philip Pullman. I don't remember if this is about Father Gomez, but he describes one of the people at the magisterium as like some gloomy Spanish painting of a saint in the ecstasy of martyrdom. There's just this eagerness to do something so wonderful that Father Gomez is skyrocketed to the gates of heaven itself, and he's really willing to do whatever it takes. He is long past logic and reason, and he's here to prove himself as a faithful servant to the Lord, the authority. Little does he know that he's a bit too late and the clouded mountain has dissolved. As Father Gomez tries to explain his purpose to Balthamos, Balthamos tells him that desire is not a sin and that love takes a million different forms, each of them beautiful and each of them worthy. And then, with great effort, Balthamos grabs Father Gomez's spider demon and proceeds to crush it. I really liked how this was portrayed because, reminder, angels don't have the flesh and bones and blood that humans do. So dust is able to kill dust, but Balthamos would never be strong enough to take on Father Gomez himself. So the spider is, of course, biting him, probably stinging him, hanging on for dear life, and all the while Father Gomez is feeling the very physical repercussions of this attack. But Balthamos is persistent. He is going to get this done. Eventually, Balthamos crushes the spider entirely, killing Father Gomez in the process. And with this, Balthamos is ready to let go. He's really wanted to die, or at least to resolve his life, since Baruch was killed, and he can finally do that now. His task has been completed. We see him dissolving under the strain of this job, and his last words are Baruch. And that is the end of Balthamos. Completely oblivious to the struggle between father and angel, the kids are sitting on the bank of this pond or lake, eating the lunch that Mary has packed for them. Mostly fruit, though. Stray raw artichoke, anyone? I loved this detail, and bless whoever put it there. Something has changed between them, and they're looking at each other, they're wanting to be physically close to one another, and eventually Lyra leans towards Will and says, "Will," and then they kiss. This kiss unlocks something, and soon after, the kids are completely bathed in this golden halo of dust. The larger cosmic flow of dust immediately slows from pouring out of all of the worlds, and Seraphina and Sophania notice it immediately. Mary sees it as well, and we recognize that Lyra has fulfilled this dual prophecy of ending death, but also saving life for consciousness. And we get the sense that, to quote, "As innocence turns into experience, all will be in harmony once more." Because experience is always more important than innocence for Philip Pullman. And again, this is a big shift from other writers like C.S. Lewis, but for Philip Pullman, growing up, living our lives to the full extent, living in these human bodies is infinitely wiser than trying to protect us from those same things. Having recognized that Lyra has fulfilled the prophecy, Serafina Pekkala knows that it is finally time for her to intervene in a real way. The kids have not been reunited with the demons yet, and she knows that this is the next step. So Serafina flies to the Mulefa world and locates Lyra and Will's demons. This is the point where she gives Will's demon a name. Will's demon is a kitty cat, and she names her Kiryava. I looked up the name Kiryava just out of curiosity, and it's Finnish, and it means mottled or multicolored, which seems like a fitting name both for how Kiryava looks, but also as kind of a nod of honor to the subtle knife itself, which we know is swirling and iridescent with all kinds of colors. Serafina has a heart-to-heart with the demons and tells the demons that it is finally time to reconcile with their kids because the demons will be needed for what's ahead. Pan approaches Lyra and is extremely hurt, feels very abandoned and very uncared for by his human. And Lyra, of course, feels absolutely terrible for what she had to do in the land of the dead, and she sincerely apologizes to Pan. We also see that Pan has settled as a pine marten. Not quite as cute as a red panda, but I'll take it. Kiryava greets Will for the first time ever, and we see that the kids touch each other's demons very subtly, very quickly. This is another non-moment in the show that kind of shocked me because it's such a big moment in the book. We know from many episodes that it is absolutely forbidden to touch someone else's demon, so the fact that the kids did this so comfortably and so quietly and we didn't see much of a reaction was a surprise. This is a huge moment of intimacy, and in the book, the demons don't settle shapes until after this happens, and the explanation behind that is that the demons knew they would never want to take on another shape than what they had been when their human's lover had touched them, if that makes sense. It's a very sweet, very romantic gesture in the book, but I felt like it was very brushed over in the show. Angel Zephania also arrives in the Mulefa world and heads to talk to Mary Malone. She tells Mary that they have indeed met before. She was the voice behind the angel talking to Mary in the cave, and that she's come to thank Mary for her serpent services, so to speak. Mary has done her task. Everything is good, and now it's time to go home. And Mary is shocked. She says, "What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. It was such a small thing to tell them this story." And Zephania says that love is never a small thing for people who are experiencing it for the first time, which I thought was beautiful and also very true. Mary is a bit upset at the idea of having to go home. Her life's work has really broadened in the Mulefa world, and her skills as a scientist have really been utilized in a new way. She's part of the Mulefa community, so I can understand why there would be some grief there. This is also the first time that we really are told that this story that Mary tells the kids about her sexual awakening and her departure from the church is what the temptation was. She just asked the kids to listen to a moment of human growth, a moment of emotional development, and that was enough. That was the great danger that the authority, the magisterium, had been so afraid of. So think about it. If that's what it takes to change the world, tell them stories. Unfortunately, Zephania's bad news continues, and she meets up with Lyra and Will for the first time, and she tells the kids that they've got to stop using the knife, essentially. Zephania tells the kids that every window that's ever been created must be closed. She explains that every time the knife is used, it creates a tear between the worlds and dust leaks out of that opening. Not only that, but that space in between the worlds is what creates a specter. So every time someone has used the knife, a specter has been born. She also clarifies that the kids cannot choose one world to live in because their demons will suffer. So if they're going to continue living at all, they need to do so in their own worlds. They won't be able to travel back and forth to see one another. Lyra and Will are absolutely devastated and shocked by this. They've been through so much. They've gone through so many struggles and hardships and dangers to finally find some peace and security, and it is being ripped out from under them just as they've reached it. Lyra doesn't want to believe that this is their fate, so she decides to consult the alethiometer again to find out if there is a way out of this, but she discovers that she cannot read the alethiometer anymore. It is not working for her in the way that it used to, and this is extremely frustrating and very devastating for her. Serafina explains to Lyra that Lyra was able to read the alethiometer by grace in the past, and she can regain it through work. There is some slightly less shitty news that Zephania has, and she tells the kids that enough dust will be created by the conscious beings in all of the worlds to maintain one window, and it is clear that that one window will be the window leading out of the land of the dead into the Mulefa for the ghosts. Lyra and Will's journey through the land of dead was not for naught. It had a purpose, and that will be maintained. But with that said, the angels will have to close the other windows that have not been closed by previous knife bearers, and they can only do that once the knife has been destroyed, meaning that Will must destroy the knife as soon as he and Lyra have returned to their home worlds. Lyra and Will are devastated by this sequence of events and definitely spend a lot of time crying together. Maybe we're crying together with them. It's a very emotional moment, but they know what needs to be done. They also promise that they'll find each other when they die, saying, every atom of me will find every atom of you, and when they make new things, they'll have to choose one atom for me and one atom for you. It's a bittersweet, very hard moment for the two of them. As much as they don't want to, the kids do move forward because this is definitely for the greater good. This is for the Republic of Heaven, in fact. Mary and Atal also have a hard moment of goodbye, and as they embrace, Atal gives Mary one of the Mulefa's precious seed pods to take with her. Will cuts a window into Lyra's Oxford so he can essentially take her home, and we see Mary and Serafina accompany the kids to the familiar Jordan College that started all of this. While the kids are talking in the Botanic garden at a bench, Serafina teaches Mary how to see her demon, which is a kind of cool moment. Lyra and Will pledge to each other that they will come to this same bench in their respective botanic gardens, in their Oxfords, and spend from noon to 1 o'clock on Midsummer's Day being with each other in their different worlds. Lyra also points to Will that yes, she will love him forever, but their love shouldn't get in the way of their futures, and should they find partners as they grow up, they shouldn't compare those partners to one another. They should really live their lives to the fullest and in the most present way possible. And Will agrees with this. I want to give a shout out to my friend Kate for helping me think about this. She reminded me that in The Subtle Knife, the book, Will's dad is killed by a witch rather than a magisterium agent. He's killed by a witch named Lena Felt who loved him, but whom he did not love back because of his allegiance to his wife, Elaine Perry. And this witch had carried this passionate love for him for quite a while, and seeing him again, she couldn't bear the thought of him existing without her, and so she killed him. And when Will sees this happen and is totally befuddled by it, confused, horrified, he realizes that this is not a love that he can understand, that this is something that is beyond his maturity. And I liked thinking about this because I think in this moment with Lyra at the bench at the Botanic Garden in Oxford, we come to understand how much the kids have grown and how much they've matured, because as Mary tells Will, it is much more romantic to live for love than to die for it. And here the kids are making this impossible choice to continue living their full lives, knowing that they'll be separated for forever, but knowing that that is the most respectful and most wise way to go about this. That feeling of love that they have for each other will be maintained not by them dying, but by them actually living. And that seemed like such a beautiful cycle, like such a beautiful way to see Will's character and Lyra's character evolve too, but particularly Will, since we had been really confronted with the fact that he had never loved someone before and understood why someone might kill or die for love. After making this promise to each other at the bench, the kids eventually do have to say goodbye, and it is a very tearful one. I sobbed my way through it, I will be honest. It was heartbreaking. We see Will go back into his Oxford. He closes the window and then he immediately breaks the knife, and he and Mary head to Elaine Perry so that he can reunite with his mom. We don't really have a strong sense of how much time has passed, but she seems okay. She is, of course, so happy to see him, and it is a very sweet reunion. Mary tells Serafina before the sisters part, as they call themselves sisters now, that she will be there for Will. She will help him however she can with all of the support that his mom might need, with all of the paperwork that might be involved in getting her services, and she just wants to be an adult in Will's life who is there to help him rather than require caretaking herself. So Will has someone in his corner, thankfully, and we know that Lyra does too, of course. Serafina will, I'm sure, keep an eye on her. We see the angels closing all of those open windows, the world righting itself, the flow of dust limiting, and finally things seem like they're coming into place. The kids go to the bench every year, and I really liked the sequence of us seeing them year by year as they aged. We find out from the credits that Will becomes a surgeon, which is a nice tie-in to his skills with a knife, and Lyra goes on to study and to learn how to read the alethiometer again. And then the show kind of teases us with, but that's another story, and we know that that picks up again in The Secret Commonwealth of the Book of Dust. I'm wondering if they're going to turn that into another TV series or maybe a movie. I like to think that they will, but who knows? We still haven't gotten the third book, so that's up in the air, but it is nice to think about. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but that is the end of his Dark Materials. And what a ride it has been. I don't even know what to say. Before I wrap up here, I would be remiss not to mention how grateful I am to have this channel, to have my subscribers follow along with me, and to have been a very small part of this amazing His Dark Materials community. I really started this channel because I was pretty depressed in my life, to be honest, and I needed something outside of my paid work to do to occupy my mind and really stimulate me intellectually. And I know this is just a simple recap of a show, but it's been such a wonderful opportunity for me to reuse some of my critical thinking skills that I've put on the shelf behind me for a while, and honestly revisit some of my favorite literary characters that I've ever encountered. This has been such a joy. To be honest, I absolutely also hate filming myself. I hate editing myself. I hate hearing my own voice for hours on end on film. So it's been a resilience and character building activity for me. If you've watched any of my videos for even just a minute or two, thank you for being a part of this and for supporting me. If you're so inclined, please join me next time for a final thoughts video in which I talk about all of my final thoughts, to be honest. What I thought of the series as a whole, what those overarching themes were, what I was missing, what I wanted to see and didn't, what I didn't want to see and did. It's gonna have all of the last loose ends tied up, hopefully. I'm also thinking of doing a video of my favorite screenshots with absolutely no context. So check back. I'll be here again. And in the meantime, thank you again so much for watching and for going on this weird and wonderful journey with me. I'd love to hear what you thought of the show and of the last episode. Were you crying like a baby too, or was it just me? Anyway, thanks again.